Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where yesterday for April Fools, fittingly, Deadpool stole the day, at least when it came to movie news. So what happened? Well, late in the afternoon, a clip went online, which I assume appeared on Extra, the TV show, where Ryan Reynolds was being interviewed by host Mario Lopez. It was a typical set interview, how are things going with the shoot, how do you like being back in Vancouver, etc., etc. But then Deadpool crashed the party on Lopez's side, took out Lopez with a chair, WrestleMania style, and then announced that Deadpool would indeed be rated R, which was no joke. They were announcing that the film would have an R rating, which, we've discussed before how that will affect the film's bottom line at the box office, but I think in the wake of Kingsman: The Secret Service, an R-rated film that's doing quite well, I think that Deadpool can clear this hurdle if it's well executed. And I think we saw signs both that confirm that and were contrary to that with this spot. Now, I think the overall impression from this joke that they did, and if you didn't see it, I've included a link in the video description where you can watch the video, but I think overall this was a success. I think that Fox should be very encouraged with the ease at which Deadpool can make massive headlines. First, when they had that first look picture last week about Deadpool, and then of course this week with the April Fool's joke. They're able to really get a lot of attention very quickly, and I think that is a good sign for the movie. Also, it was very fun to see Deadpool moving around in live action, not that we suspect him being CGI, as it was in that Deadpool test footage. This was a real actor. It's curious to know whether or not it was Ryan Reynolds or not, where Lopez was, or if it was a stunt double. But whoever was in that suit, it looked really realistic. And I have some pictures up here, as you can see, as to the two different looks that we have here. We have both Ryan Reynolds, kind of Wade Wilson-y, I guess. He doesn't have obviously the scars that are a trademark of Wilson's character as his body fights off, I believe, a cancer. His healing factor creates a really scarred face for him, which is one of the reasons he wears a mask. But then also we see Deadpool in all his glory. And I think one thing that's interesting here is that you can see the mask, the way it's done. I think that as we discussed when that first look came out, that the movement with the eyes probably will be CGI'd, because while everything else, it looks like it's leather or pleather if they didn't want to spend the money, but while the suit is leather, it looks very good. It's very, very good. The eyes don't look like they move at all, so I think they're probably going to be able to go in there and change things up if necessary. Or maybe they'll have different masks that he can put on for different looks, switch out the eyes with different expressions. That could be really interesting as well. And I'm sure they'll be able to get a lot of mileage about how they are able to do the suit and the mask and, best compliment, I guess you could say, Ryan Reynolds' performance. And the interesting thing about Ryan Reynolds as Wade Wilson is he's rocking a very similar hairstyle to Jared Leto's Joker. So it looks like, shaved on the sides, close on top, might become a very popular hairstyle in 2016. So what could I possibly have a problem with this spot? It's great to see Deadpool in action. The costume looks fantastic. They got a lot of headlines. What could be wrong? Well, I'm seeing an interesting trend here, and that the humor that they're putting in this movie so far is really old. A lot of you pointed out that the first look was actually supposed to be an homage to Burt Reynolds' infamous or famous, depending on whether or not you're a Playgirl fan, spread that he did a while back, where he was on a bear rug. And when I say a while back, I mean a while back, when Burt Reynolds was young. So while that's a funny joke, it didn't even occur to me when I first saw it, as you'll see in my coverage of that. That wasn't even on my radar because it was such a long time ago. And then here, at the end, he makes a Saved by the Bell joke, which, of course, could play with a certain demographic, but I don't think it's going to play with as wide encompassing a demographic as Fox and the Deadpool team would like. Now, granted, Jimmy Fallon recently did a Saved by the Bell sketch, which did very well on YouTube. I don't know, like 70, or it was 30 million views? I think maybe 30 million views. It had a lot of views. Millions and millions of views. So there's definitely people who would get that joke, but the sweet spot for a movie, especially like Deadpool, is going to be that, teen and tween audience who will have to get someone to take them, right? I'm sure Deadpool wants you to see his movie responsibly because it's rated R. But still, I think that while Ryan Reynolds, I'm glad that he has some of these jokes in there, and they're going to certainly appeal to some of his own fans who've been fans of his since the beginning of his career, he's going to have to vary up his references. And I think that Ryan Reynolds, I hope that he's doing that kind of homework homework. And he's a very good improviser. I'm sure he'll be improvising on the set of making this movie, but I hope that in that regard, he's maybe filling up his arsenal, not just of weapons, but with reference points to make sure that he can appeal to multiple generations. Because if the thing's too insidery, you could end up with a Scott Pilgrim versus the World rather than a Kingsman: The Secret Service. Because everybody's familiar with the spy genre. And also Kingsman, I think, was very current with the Eggsy character, a lot of the music choices, and also the character like Samuel L. Jackson's Valentine being very much a cross between Steve Jobs and Russell Simmons. So that was a film that I think that while it was a throwback to the old spy movies and it wanted to bring that back to us in some regard, it also very much was in tune with modern sensibilities. So Deadpool has to be careful about that. So I'm curious what you think of the spot. What did you think of the humor? What did you think of seeing Deadpool in action? What do you think of Ryan Reynolds' hair? And also, what do you think of the R rating? I think we all knew this was coming, and I'm glad they're going for it. But do you think that Deadpool can succeed with an R rating? All right, so that's the first story of the day. Now, the second story of the day, we're going to move over to Disney and a wonderful picture that Dwayne Johnson tweeted out, or actually Instagrammed out yesterday. And I loved the behind-the-scenes aspect of this photo. I'll bring it up right here, and you'll see that Dwayne Johnson is in the Disney animation offices. And what's he doing? He's signing his contract to be the male lead in Moana. I think that's so great that he didn't just take a picture of himself at the offices or, with somebody who's going to be working on the film, but of actually signing the contract. And as you can see, he has to sign a whole bunch of copies of it. He's got several pens there. I think it just really makes the moment seem really super cool, especially to those of us who are into the business side of Hollywood. And I just think it's a wonderful way to announce his participation in the film. And also, you'll see him gesturing to his two Big Hero 6 pals over there, which is very nice. And the reason he says he's doing that is because they're excited that in the film he will sing, which is fantastic. I think this is such a huge get for Moana. Moana is fast approaching, coming out in 2016, November 2016. That's very soon. So Dwayne Johnson's going to be recording this voiceover, I would assume, any day now, and maybe we'll soon be hearing who will be cast as the voice of Moana. Whoever it is going to have a hard time outshadowing Dwayne Johnson. He's going to play a god, I believe the Maui god, who helps Moana on her journey. I think that's a great role for Dwayne Johnson. He actually hails from Hawaii. I think it's just great synergy, and I think that everybody's going to want Moana merchandise, which is rock certified. He's a wonderful team player. Just watch Furious 7, as I said in my review. He has the cheesiest lines you've ever heard, but he says them and he commits to them. He's not even apologetic about it. He's like, these are my lines and I'm honored to deliver them. And I'm sure he'll approach the singing in the same manner. People say he has a pretty good singing voice, but I'm sure it's good enough for what he'll be called on to do here. But I think he'll be a huge, not just creatively an asset to the film, but in terms of publicity and getting people to see this film and playing up its heritage and that it does really take Hawaii seriously. But again, I hope that Moana herself doesn't get overshadowed by The Rock. It's very hard to compete with The Rock, and I hope they get an actress and an animator on Moana's character that can make her someone who can go toe-to-toe with Dwayne Johnson. That would be, I think, would benefit everyone. You don't want her to beat out Dwayne Johnson either. You want them to operate as equals. So expect more Moana news to start coming very soon, especially because they now have their crown jewel for the film, Dwayne Johnson. So I'm curious what you think of Dwayne Johnson being in Moana. Does it make you any more interested in seeing it, or were you already sold? What do you think of him singing? And also, what do you think of him Instagramming out a photo of him signing his actual contract for the movie? All right, so the third story of the day is about kids' comics. Now, kids' comics have really fallen away as of late. They just, the big two just don't know what to do with them. And I think that while Disney was producing quite a lot of comics when they had to deal with Boom Studios, who I, of course, have a very good relationship with. They publish my own comic, Superbia. But for a while, Boom had the Disney and Muppets, license to publish comics, and they were quite prolific, and it was a real boon, not just for the company, but for those characters and titles. They republished, a number of Uncle Scrooge comics, these beautiful hardbound editions, but then of course they lost that when Marvel was purchased by Disney, and they wanted Disney to produce Marvel comics. Now the Big Thunder Mountain comic that recently came out was very good. I really, really enjoyed it, by the way, and I suggest you pick it up, but they haven't really done anything besides reprint some of the Boom titles that were put out, which is kind of like, a little iffy. So Marvel isn't really utilizing the license that is now something that they have. So I'm glad to see kids comics moving forward any way they can, because it's the gateway to adult comic book readers, and I think that's really, really important. I guess movies are now starting to try and serve that purpose, is getting people interested in comics, but I think we all can see that the comic book audience is getting older and older. So anyway, what are the kids' comics that are coming out? Well, it's Minions. And I'm sure everybody will be interested in Minions comics of all ages. And I'm sure they'll work to appeal to an all-ages audience. But it's very interesting beyond just the fact we're getting Minions comics, and that's how we're getting them. But the nitty-gritty of it is that these come out in the summer. They'll hit the stands June 17th. They'll be available digitally. They'll be available in comic book stores. And then in digest format, they'll be available in bookstores. And we're actually getting a series and also a few hardcovers or graphic novels, which will be available as paperback and hardcover. So lots of Minions stories for us to enjoy. But what's particularly interesting about this is that they're being published not by Marvel, not by DC, not by Boom, not by Image, but by Titan Comics, a British publisher of comic books. And I think people often forget how strong a relationship the UK has with our comic book industry. Just like the film industry in the UK has very strong connections to the American film industry. Of course, Alan Moore, Mark Millar, these are all UK talents. So that's very exciting. And then, there's a very rich history of, the characters that come out of the UK and the talent that it produces, et cetera, et cetera. So it's great to see the Minions, also being a British export. Now, what's also interesting about this is that it just underlines how European this brand is. Illumination Entertainment has a lot of its offices and animators in France. And speaking of animators, 2 of those animators are going to be working on the Minions comic. Usually what the situation is they give the license to a publisher, and that publisher hires comic book talent to then interpret the material, both a writer and an artist. But in this case, you're going to have people who work on the actual Minions movies and the Despicable Me movies depicting the characters, in-house, so to say. And I think that's very, very effective. Just like on Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, if you look at the credits of that comic, which does come from Marvel, you'll see that Imagineers, Disney Imagineers, were consultants on the way that story is coming about and what they're trying to tell. So very interesting, and you can kind of see hints at maybe how they're thinking of plussing the rhyme, by the way. Very interesting with this introduction of blue spirits or blue glowy stuff. I'm like, are you going to change Thunder Mountain Railroad? It's pretty awesome the way it is. So I think this is fantastic. It's another great way to enjoy the Minions and to get people, younger readers into comics, or just anyone into comics. Comics, I think, I continue to always will believe, a wonderful medium for people to read on their own, to give to someone else as a gift, and to read together. So, I'm interested in what you think of the European heritage of the Minions brand. All right, so I have the viewer question for today. I got to get this Deadpool picture out of the way so I can read it. And this is from Kagriel. And Kagriel says, "Hi, Grace." And I think this is something, speaking of, adaptations, etc., that I think a lot of you will be interested in. And Kagriel says, "Hi, Grace. I'm a big fan of your morning movie news." Thank you. I was wondering a few things. The Seventh Son movie, will there be any sequels? The books were phenomenal, and I think the movie ruined key parts of the book, but I would like to see more installments. Also, is there any hope for the sequel of The Giver? I was a big fan of the books and absolutely loved the movie. I have read the whole Giver series, but do not think they would make a movie on the books as they follow different characters. I would love to see more out of these two. Could it be possible? I'd love it if you could answer this. Well, I'm happy to answer it, and I think a lot of people are on the same page as you. Now, Mortal Instruments was another book series recently that did not succeed at the box office, but produced, I felt, a pretty solid movie. I liked it. But the way that series has continued on, they said they were going to make a sequel, but it never came about. They've actually introduced, I believe, a television series on ABC Family, which is a fantastic match with that property. ABC Family is very successful with that kind of young adult topic, and I think they could do a lot with Mortal Instruments. It's almost like ABC Family is the tween version of Lifetime, and now they have like their witch entry. So I think that could do very well. So you might see some books be able to find a second life in television if they weren't able to make it on the big screen. I think The Giver, though, Mortal Instruments had a lot of support even when it was a movie. It might not have been successful, but I think there was, interest in it. But I think The Giver crashed and burned so hard, I don't think anyone's going to revisit that anytime soon. Same for Seventh Son. Jeff Bridges ruined both of those movies. And I think the only hope that you really have, Kagriel, is that a time will pass, and that maybe later down the line, as Hollywood loves to mine old failed properties for something they could possibly reinvent and succeed with, someone else will take a second crack at it. That could potentially happen. But even then, they've been burned so badly on both of those projects, Seventh Son and The Giver, even in the future, the far future, a producer in a studio might hesitate to try and revisit the material because they'll say it's been proven that it doesn't work. So I guess what I want to ask you, everybody else today, in light of this viewer question, is what do you think of properties, beloved properties? I'd say Percy Jackson is another one that Hollywood ruins. What do you think? It's, I think it's a danger of the business. It's so exciting to get that deal, to get the call that a studio wants to develop your property, your book, as either a movie or a TV show. But I think that, always remember, you're never out of the woods. Something could always happen. So it's important in life to be excited, but to temper that excitement with, what's coming down the line and to protect against it. So I think, and I think that publishers would be wise to protect these properties as well, because while they get a big check, part of that big check, I'm sure, they want this book to continue to sell. They want people to like the movie or to like the TV show and say, maybe I should pick up the book. So perhaps, we should see in the future publishers, because publishers are quite powerful and popular, I guess, with Hollywood, and that they dictate so much of the content that comes out of Hollywood. Do you think that maybe publishers should try and safeguard against this about having authors be able to pick the talent that's involved and to have more of a say in it? Because when you see the really successful properties that are adapted, Harry Potter, 50 Shades of Grey, Twilight, it's when the author is heavily involved in the adaptation. So if Hollywood can't see that they would obviously benefit from that kind of involvement, although quite a fight over 50 Shades, but it'll work out. I don't understand why there's so much animosity over that film. You all made so much money. Money should calm everyone down. Hundreds of millions. It's still the most successful movie of the year. Over 500 million worldwide. Why is there anger here? You should all take yourselves to a really nice lunch and then, be like, we would like to get more money, so we should bury the hatchet in a giant pile of money. So it just shows you that sometimes money can't solve everything. So anyway, I'd be curious to know what you think about publishers and authors and how they can safeguard these properties, not just for themselves and for their business, but for the fans, for the people who've enjoyed these books and made them something that Hollywood would be interested in the first place. All right, thank you so much. That's today's morning movie news. Please write down below what you think of today's top 3 stories and the viewer question, and of course, anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow and any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.